Hello and welcome to Meet the Founder here at modl.ai. I'm Thompson, and in this series I'll be sitting down with several of the key players who were instrumental in making modl.ai a reality. In this episode I sit down with the company CEO Christoffer Holmgård to discuss his journey in game development and the past, present and future of the company. Let's get into it. So Christoffer, as part of modl.ai, you're at the forefront of artificial intelligence for video game development. But how exactly did we end up here? What brought you into game development to begin with?
I think I got into game development, I started with BASIC on the Amstrad CPC 464. Back in the day, there was something called click and play. And I don't know if a lot of people remember this, but that was like my next big thing, but I was spending a bunch of time with that. Played along, around with computers like everyone else throughout my youth, tortured my friends with all my game design ideas. And then, eventually, when I became older, it turned out that this was something you could actually do as a career. I didn't start out in professional game development. I actually took a little tour around psychology first and did a bunch of work in cognitive psychology statistics. But at the end of the day, it turned out I was always just interested in sort of like the intersection between human experience, play, technology, mathematics. And that's why I think I ended right back up in the games industry eventually. It was bound to happen.
And so one of the critical steps in your career that led towards the founding of modl.ai was that you actually studied a PhD in artificial intelligence for games. And in fact, this is where you and I first met. And so what led you down that path? What did you hope to gain from a research career after having worked in the games industry?
For me, like the work that I did in game development and games research, you could almost say they always went together, but they certainly converged eventually. The underlying notion of what I've always been interested in and trying to do is coming up with ways of capturing what people do in various situations and then predicting it and replicating it and using it for various things. And it just turns out that video games is a fantastic place to apply that because everything is digital, right? Everything is inside this universe. So we can see what the players are doing, we can use that to gather data about what they're doing, and then we can take that information and turn it into models that actually do something in the exact same virtual universe. The other thing that's really interesting about video games as an environment is that most of the activities that you do in there, they might not be exactly the same as you do in the real world, but they're mostly voluntary, right? People go to video game environments or to online environments to have fun, to experience things that they're really drawn to. So everything in there is it's really true and authentic in the sense that people are engaging in it because they want to. So in some ways you get to see people from their best and worst sides in video games and virtual environments. That's where because it's unbounded, it's unrestricted by other things.
Yeah, so this sort of brings us towards the formation of modl.ai, but it also presents a new problem. Because as you and I both know, the methods and approaches discovered in academic research don't always translate very cleanly into the real world. Were you confident that you could bring these ideas out of academia and make them into valid industry tools?
You never know if you're going to find a market when you do a startup. That's a lot of what the exercise is about, I suppose. What gave me a lot of confidence in what we were trying to do with modl.ai was that the things that we were addressing, the problems we were attacking were really founded in our own experiences as game developers. So for us, this was sort of a chance to pick and choose from the plethora of great ideas and interesting things that were happening in games research. And then saying, we think that these are the ones, if we tweak it this way, or if we reduce it this way, or if we make it a little simpler, or if we change this thing, we can take it and apply it to some very real problems that we've, experienced ourselves while we were developing games.
So one thing that's kind of sitting on my mind right now is that there's an unspoken benefit from both yourself and many of the other founders having experience in both game development and in games research. How valuable would you say that's been in defining what the company's goals and perspectives are in these opening years?
I think it's absolutely integral when you try to when you work on doing this transfer of something from the research space into production, that you have somebody with that experience on your team. And I don't know if it necessarily needs to be the people who start the company, but you do need to have that experience and that expertise in the mix. I strongly believe that. Because the actual challenges and the actual problems that are worth solving, it's only the people who sit and actually use it in production, they're the ones who can tell you about that, right?
And I feel like what you're saying here really speaks to the value of the people that you've brought on board. And particularly if you look at a lot of the team that you have now, it's a mixture of people with games industry experience, but also you have a lot of academic researchers and even PhD graduates. Can you speak to how valuable that team has been to getting modl.ai to where it is today?
I think the team is the most fundamental thing about modl.ai, everything from our culture to the products, to the way we deploy, to the way we work with customers. From the very start, we decided to take an approach that is very different from what you typically see in startups. And we always wanted to achieve what we call it sort of critical mass of these two reagents that you kind of need to make this special magic happen. So we've always been very focused on having people with a lot of experience and skill in game development and people with a lot of skill and experience and expertise in game AI research, and then bringing those two things together. And really, to a certain extent, like in the beginning, we just ignored all else. We said, this is what we need. And where often you'd have like one or two people with a background in the research space, our thinking was, what if we try and really just like go all in on both of these two priorities and see what happens. And I think that's what we're seeing work out for us.
Well, it sounds like it's working out, certainly, because here we are 4 years later, modl.ai still going strong. But I guess looking back on that formative era, what was the big concern you had when starting out? Was there anything, niggling at the back of your head, keeping you up at night?
There are a lot of concerns you have as a founder of a company, but I think two major concerns for us one was technological, or sort of like, well, rooted in technology and game design. So one thing you could be concerned about was that imagine that every video game out there had individual needs, and that none of them were overlapping in terms of what they needed in testing, in AI, in player bots, what have you. Imagine that we would always have had to go like game by game by game by game, and there was no way of unifying the needs. But every game was truly unique in every aspect. That would have made something like modl.ai impossible, because it wouldn't be scalable, right? Now, thankfully, it turns out it isn't that way. The games industry is, I like to say every game is unique, but also most games are the same. And what I mean by that is that if you look at the underlying modules that make up most video games, those are kind of like similar, and they produce the same needs at a certain level of the production. And the creativity and the uniqueness is the way that people combine these modules and put these things together and create unique experiences and add their own creativity on top. And because we target the things that happen at that, you might say, that shared modular level, that means that we can serve many games using the same methods. We don't have to build everything from scratch for every individual game. So that was one thing. And now the second thing, another thing that was, that was a big concern for us when we got started was, will anyone in the games industry even listen to this? Will they just say no? We have things in practice for testing that we like. We like the way we do things currently. We know how to build AI systems that work for our creative teams, and we're just going to keep these. We fundamentally don't believe in putting any of the things that modl.ai can offer outside to an external vendor. I mean, that was a really real concern, and something that we could only figure out by going out into the market and talking to a ton of game developers to understand what they wanted to, right? But also seeing commitment, because one thing is that, people might tell you they would be interested in what you're building, but you don't really know until they buy it from you, right? Until then, it's just interesting. It's an opportunity. It's to think about new things and meet new people. But I think the most important, the biggest worry, and one of our greatest wins was when we got some of those first customer contracts where we saw, oh, okay, this is actually something that there's a real appetite for modern game artificial intelligence out there in the market.
And I realised we didn't speak to this critical moment. Let's wind that clock back 4 years. What was the key moment that actually led to modl.ai being formed? When
we formed modl.ai, I think there was, the people behind the company go back for more than a decade. And actually, we had been working together, some of us, for a decade before we started modl.ai. So you might sort of like ask a question, why did we decide to start it, in 2018? What was the things that led up to that? I think what was happening around, especially in the period from 2016 to 2017, was that we were seeing some of the methods that we had been working on ourselves and that other people had been working on in game AI research started to move to greater scale and slowly started to move into the market as well. We could sense this like openness in the games industry for applying some of these methods. And at the same time, it's a few years back now, but at the same time, the deep learning revolution had really gotten going. A range of new methods had been invented in addition to that. Some of you might remember AlphaGo and then later AlphaZero and some of these algorithms, but you were seeing like a lot of technological innovation happening around 2016 and 2017. And at the same time, you were seeing the games industry starting to pick up on this with curiosity, but because it was kind of left field to the way that artificial intelligence normally is done in games, I think nobody really knew exactly what to do with it. And so for us, having specialized in this for quite a few years, that felt like the right moment and the right opportunity. We were out at dinner, a few of us in New York City, after working at the New York University Game Innovation Lab, working with a bunch of these methods and just chatting this over. And it dawned upon us that probably the time to do this was now or never. And so we decided to start the company.
And yeah, so now modl.ai is 4 years old. So from your perspective, what's been the highlight, I guess, of these first few years as CEO?
Well, for me personally, and looking sort of like internally at the company, I think the group of people that we have managed to bring together, not just the founders, but everyone who's in the group, I think that's incredibly essential to my mind. Looking more externally, I think the fact that we had that from day one, but the fact that we have commercial traction in the market, but we actually managed to convince studios large and small to use these offerings. I think that's been the big first win for us, to get that sort of like trust from people that they will put core parts of their game development process in the hands of you as you show up with an unproven technology that they don't necessarily understand how it works or what it's going to do for them. But you can get people to believe in you, and that's really what you need to get going, right? You need some of the established players in the space to place a little bet on you as a startup and say, we're going to work with these people because we believe in them.
And as we're looking into the future, what are the things you're most excited about over the next couple of years?
For the next couple of years, we have a range of priorities in Model. I feel the way that we use our bots for testing games, we're getting to the precipice of not only being able to scale that, but being able to offer this to people so they can just use it on their own. One thing that I'm really looking forward to is seeing a wide range of game developers get this into their hands, giving them the tools to put these testing bots into their games, and then seeing what they do with it, how they extend it, what they look for, what they request. At the same time, our second priority over the next couple of years is to upgrade the behavior and the smarts of our bots, as you will, to make them more general. The ultimate vision for what we want to do with our bots is that we want you to be able to take an AI from modl.ai and just drop it into your game, and it just works. It might not be perfect, it might not be the best player in the world, but you can actually just drop a bot into your game and it will do intelligent things. The way that we're pursuing that is through something called foundation models. And what we'll be working on for the next few years, and probably longer than that as well, what we'll be working on with foundation models is to collect enough information about gameplay behavior, to have enough examples of games, to have enough data out there, but we can train large models that can play just about any game. If you're familiar with the large text models or large image generation models we're seeing now, where you can just put in a bit of text and you get a story back or you get an image back, well, what we want to be able to do is the same thing, where you put an AI into a game, it gets to see the game, and you get you get behavior back. You get realistic player behavior back that you can use for a multitude of purposes inside of your game.
And so moving in this direction with the foundational models, what we're really talking about here is creating a general intelligence architecture, right? That you've got agents that you can drop into a game, and with a bit of configuration they can begin to figure out that game and begin to work in a way that a developer might find useful. I guess moving forward, how are you approaching this so that game designers are going to have a suite of tools that allow these agents to be useful and suit whatever their design needs are going to be?
Figuring out how we're going to have these foundation models work with designer intent is one of the major open questions that we're still looking into. And I think that's where you need expertise and experience from practical game design. You need to think about the user experience of putting these bots together. You need to have a very deep understanding of designer intent and creative processes. Like, all of this will be integral to figuring out how we're going to be bounding in these foundation models and actually making sure they do the thing that you want in games. I think you've already seen with things like, again, think about the text generation systems like GPT-3 or the image generation systems like DALL-E. They're incredibly good at giving you something that's a little bit different from what you expected and is interesting, but it's not, maybe not quite what you asked for, and maybe not 100% controllable. And I think initially we're going to see that be the same thing for foundation models for games. Now, maybe that's okay if you use them in the right kind of design, with the right kind of design intent. Maybe that in itself is useful. You could imagine that if you design your game around the fact that the bots will be human-like, but maybe a little bit unpredictable, maybe that's fine. Maybe that's an interesting experience for a multiplayer game or some sort of like big online universe or experience. But I do think that we'll have to figure out sort of like how to train behavior that is, again, I think modularization and pragmatism is the right answer here. So maybe you don't train for some games, you don't train or create a full bot for the game. You create different parts of behavior, and then you have a human designer put it together so that it works in the way that they want and in the way that it works with their creative vision.
And so my last question, building on the tools and the existing research you've already conducted, you're hoping to refine the product and continue to make this a useful, applicable tool for game developers. I guess for all the studios out there who are maybe looking at this and finding this somewhat interesting, why should they be reaching out to come and work with modl.ai now?
I think fundamentally what we can offer the developers out there, what modl.ai offers developers, is it's a better life. It's a better process. It's a smoother way of building your game. And it's a way of taking away a lot of the processes that nobody necessarily really enjoys, and then allowing you to take the creative resources that you have in your company and reappropriating, reassigning them to something that's probably more interesting to them. That's what automation really does for you. And I've never met a single person in the video game industry who didn't have a creative drive. I think that's why people end up in this industry. They like technology, they have a creative drive, they like the people who are in the industry. You would never be in games if you didn't have some sort of creative drive. So I would say that everyone deserves to have as much of their repetitious work automated as possible. I think automation is a friend of every game developer, and we should use that to spend more time on the creative aspects of the work. Now, if we wanted to get a little more specific, the couple of things that we can do for game developers right now is that we can help you get faster to market with your game. We can take away waiting, we can take away interdependencies, we can make sure that you always know what state your game is in, give you peace of mind. That's essentially what automation and automated testing does for you. And now if you have that, if you used our AI engine to deliver that to your game, the next step is that if you have a game that would benefit from having actual, player bots in there that can play with your players as part of the final player experience, you'll get that as an option with the automated testing as well. And those are the two things that we can bring out to game developers out there right now, essentially.
Thanks, Christoffer, for taking the time to chat with me here on this Meet the Founder series. For everyone else out there, please stick around for even more videos, as I'm going to chat with many of the other founding members of modl.ai to get their perspectives on the past, present, and future of artificial intelligence for game development.